Hi, my name's Terrence Evans, and just as you've seen in the beginning of the intro of this show, this is a show about social issues, primarily child apprehension and the wrong doing of our government on breaking the family unit and family and children. Today we have with us from different parts of Canada two individuals that are professionals in their field. We have Nicholas and we have Sandy. Good to have you guys on to the show.
Thank you.
Hi,
Good to be
Terrence.
here.
Good to be here as well.
Good. Nicholas, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your group and what your group does.
Sure. My name is Nicholas Stathopoulos, and I am out of Toronto, Ontario. I am a social service crimes researcher. The group is called SSEC, Social Service Economics Crimes Research, and basically we are a research group of experts in the field of social services, and we are structured to investigate and analyze how the social service industry functions. We prepare studies and analysis, and then we could provide recommendations to competent authorities.
Very well, very well. And so, how long has this group been in existence?
Well, the group has been in existence for a very short time. Actually, we created the discipline of social service crimes research. There was a need to create this discipline because there seems to be an unprecedented amount of number of crimes committed against families by social services that nobody was paying attention to, and endless documented abuses committed against children by an unprecedented number of social service agencies throughout North America, not only in Canada. They have become what appears to be a common occurrence of misconduct and abuse against the family unit. This is something that we had to look into. This is something that we had to do. It also appeared that the proper authorities, such as prosecutors, police, investigators, were neglecting to investigate many issues that were surrounding a lot of improprieties as far as these groups, as far as these agencies were concerned.
Hmm. It's really interesting because I myself just launched something called MCFRD, and we're sort of an oversight committee here working, of course, with your group in British Columbia to do the exact same things that are going on in Ontario that are actually happening here. And it's funny, later on the next session, we'll have another advocate that's doing the same thing in the UK along with a family. Now, we also have Sandy on here. And Sandy, I'll let you just spit out a tiny bit of your dossier.
Okay. Thank you for that.
No problem, no problem.
I started out in early childhood education. I worked in as an early childhood educator in preschool. For example, worked with junior and senior kindergarten students for 4 years. Then I moved on to work with um, group home facilities. I became a supervisor under the province of Ontario transfer payment through the Association for Community Living with the children's program, which was the first children's program with the depopulation of the institutions back in the mid 80s.
Okay, okay.
And I stayed with that program. And because it was so new, and because it was a pilot project, I would say, it was a strong learning curve for me. So there was a great deal that I gained from that. So did my staff.
Hmm.
We had 9 multiply handicapped children in the program, and it of course compelled a lot of other training for me as well while I was in that role. Then I moved on to work as a child protection worker for 5 years for the Children's Aid Society.
Okay.
And I worked with them, yes, in northeastern Ontario, worked with the Children's Aid Society for 5 years. And I was also a specialized foster care coordinator because of my training and exceptionality,
Hmm.
my specialties.
Hmm.
And in the time that I worked in that field, it took me a little bit of time to recognize it, um, which I think is probably indicative of a normal thinking human being. And one does not go into a professional program, look around and say, okay, where are the psychopaths? That doesn't happen. It's something that kind of encroaches upon your perception as you go along. And that's what happened here. And I noticed it with a couple of staff. Now, that was, again, back in the 90s. It has since become even more darkened, even more convoluted than what it was back then. It seemed to be almost at one of the more infantile stages of encroaching upon families and tearing the institution of the family apart, tearing them
Yes.
asunder.
Yes.
Anyway, I challenged it, and I challenged it repeatedly, but that ended up costing me my position. I was set up. Then I relocated to British Columbia, and I worked in the same kind of position, where the governing body was the Ministry of Children and Family Development. And again, a repeat of the same kind of actions, a repeat of the same kind of behaviors. I worked in treatment facilities and worked as an interim supervisor in the program, and worked with youth and children again, and saw the damage that was being done to the children, where they should have been taking the recommended assessments that were coming to the attention of supervisors and executive management, and they were ignoring these assessments, that these children in crucial, critical years of their development needed to get this kind of treatment. It was so necessary. Otherwise, if they didn't have that kind of treatment applied to them, if they weren't subject to that treatment at those stages of development,
Yes.
nothing would save them. Okay. Anyway, I fought hard to get them what they needed. And again, it put me as odd man out. I was ostracized. So I went back and studied for paralegal applications, and I graduated from CDI in the accelerated course in British Columbia, and worked as a family lay advocate there under for specializing in applications from the Ministry of Children and Family Development, and in the provincial court.
Wow,
and I did that for 2 years, and then moved back to Ontario.
Wow,
and now I work with Nicholas, and because we both see eye to eye, I think the kind of presentation that we give on public, the social utility that we have available to all of us, for example, Facebook, the kind of information that we put out there gives a little bit of an idea of who we are as professionals and as people, and that's how we, connected. And I've been working with Nicholas's group for a few months now, and I feel honored to do the work.
Now, you say the social network like Facebook and stuff like that. do you find that the people that you're trying to report against, which is of course the government, are finding you through that as well?
Oh, absolutely.
And so how are they reacting? I mean, you're talking about these people as if they're a gang.
Well, you know what? It's called just giving description to the action. It's almost like a long-running observation that I'm giving you. I'm elucidating details regarding the way these people behave. And if you want to say that compares to a gang, and if you looked it up in the Webster's Dictionary or the, Oxford Wagnall's College Dictionary, and it tells you the same thing, yeah, I guess they are. Exactly. They are what they present.
Exactly. So now you've prepared a long, lengthy paper for us on some of the tactics and methodologies, which I know Nicholas is familiar with by coming on to a couple of my other radio shows, that these people actually perpetuate against the family unit and against children.
That's right. They do. It's come a long way ago, far, far back, back to the turn or preceding the turn of the 20th century. And it's gone on for all of this time. It's done in a very quiet, subtle, and cryptic way so that people are not aware that they're being indoctrinated into believing that these people are experts in dealing with family issues when families go into crisis, and that the most operative choice would to ask for their intercession because nobody knows it as well as they do. Exactly. They are the pristine example of how to resolve issues. They are pro-family. They are pro-family and pro-children. They purport to be that. They purport to look at trying to walk families through the issues that brought them into crisis so that they can talk about and resolve those issues and restore relational integrity within their family unit and the solidarity, while actually strengthening the solidarity of their family unit. That's what they purport to be. That's what they put out to the public.
And
Right,
so,
and that's the key word they purport to. We've come to the realization that they're able to cause irreparable damage and hardships by pitting unlimited resources and power that's allocated to them against defenseless families to win cases or create cases.
Exactly.
well, yeah, I mean, one of the things that these people seem to do is they are constantly attacking families who stand up for their rights
That's right.
financially. Financially,
That's
you know,
They
and
double up on it.
well, yes, and then they use the court lingo and the court interpretation of language to bend and twist the rules, which there are no rules except for their own, to best fit their personal agenda, is what I have
Well,
found here.
they violate it all the time. Their paramount purpose, whether it's in British Columbia, Ontario, New Brunswick, the territories, wherever it is that you go, they all share the same language. And their paramount purpose is to uphold and ensure the protection of all children. And support of that primary paramount purpose, they want to include the family, because the family is the most crucial in terms of supporting the child to develop to become the best that he can be. And so that message resonates right across Canada and into the United States as well. The language is identical. They might change a little bit of the verbiage,
Yes.
but it's the same thing. It means the same thing, and yet they do just the opposite. They violate it right out of the chutes.
Exactly.
right, and they have questionable. They have systems of questionable actions that a particular agency might utilize to achieve profit through a fraudulent mean. This is very concerning if we really think about this. How is it that every social worker throughout North America and the UK acts the same, speaks the same, behaves the same, and thinks the same? This is something that should concern us all.
Exactly.
My biggest concern is a lot of these social workers, and I'm not going to say all, but a lot of them seem to have their own issues. And by becoming a social worker in the positions of power that they hold, they become judge and jury, and they have absolutely no one to respond to. In fact, the agency that they work for protects them and insulates them from being prosecuted by working for them.
Oftentimes the ones who do have the biggest apparently big, largest, copious amounts of baggage are the ones who end up going into positions of authority. They're the ones who go into the semi or middle management position of protection or team leader, protection supervisor or team leader, and they're the ones who continue down that path of perpetuating a constant perseverant breaking of the law to get these children into care and to create for the parents in the interim the kind or condition, the kind of working relationships so that the parents are perceived as hysterical, out of touch, and even being labeled by psychologists as borderline personality disorder.
Exactly.
These people,
Exactly.
these ones that are the most convoluted, in my perception, in the group, the work that I've done, right there, right on line, right there, side to side with these people, because I was a child protection worker. My perception is these people are perceived as the good ones. Those are the ones who are going to make a difference. And I've heard language from executive directors and directors of service that describe these workers as dedicated,
Yes.
profoundly committed, excellent protection workers who do nothing but what is in the best interests of children and in honor of the family unit. And in the interim, they're doing everything to drive these families crazy, to destroy them.
To destroy the family and the parents that are fighting very hard to get their children back. And meanwhile, separating the children from the family and not even bringing the unit back together.
Exactly.
You know.
And they get rewarded. It's done unwittingly. It's done in cryptic manners. Mm-hmm. You don't see it. Mm-hmm. It's done in a hidden way. But the one who had the most crown wards that year got moved into a position of a senior position. She led the team.
Exactly. Exactly. So I'm going to get you to start maybe talking a little bit about your paper. And I don't have it up here in front of me, but I'll let you kind of go through it. And so we can kind of go through it and bring it up with the next guest that's coming on the next show. And we can kind of show some of these things and some of these behaviors by listening to the parent explain what they've been through.
Okay.
Okay.
What we see, and I don't know if anybody else has had the same kind of experience that I have, but I've had occasion a number of times to sit down and reflect on the changes in society and say to myself, there's something that's missing, something that's created a break. There's a breakage here. There's a breakage with the people, the family. The
Yes.
family, in my opinion, is the backbone of the country. There's something that's cracked that, and I'm not quite sure, I can't put my finger on it, but it seems to have manifested itself some time ago. I just don't know where it's coming from. Then I met Nicholas, who opened up my eyes. Even though I was right there in the throes of it, I
Yes.
could not see what was really going on. And it's really about eugenics, is what it comes right down to.
Exactly.
And I took in this article that I've done, and I'll name the article verbatim. The
Yes.
title of the article is "The Benchmarks in Cryptic Methodologies, Purpose to Dissipate the Institution of the Family." And then as a subtitle, although it doesn't read like that when you first look at it, "The Creating of a New World Order Through the Long Arm of Child Protection."
Yes. Yes.
And eugenics from dictionary.com means the study or belief in the possibility of improving the qualities of the human species or a human population, especially by such means as discouraging reproduction by persons having genetic defects or presumed to have inheritable undesirable traits. The preference of one over the other.
Yes.
That's the start of it.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
it goes all the way back before the turn of the 20th century with vulgar Marxist theoreticians. One of them was Lenin. His wife was Krupskaya. They said that the family, the institution of the family, actually, that she said it into the genesis of the 20th century in one of her groups. And I took it from another article, and I posted it, and I don't know where I've filed it somewhere, and I can't just quickly retrieve it, but it resonated with me. And what she said, and it was October 1929, where she stood before a group of other like-minded people and said, what we must do is we need to get into the family. We need to find ways and avenues of getting in to infiltrate the family so that we get the family cracked. That's
Yes.
very important
Yes.
in completing and realizing the precepts of crypto-eugenics, as we say under social service economic crime researchers. And in order to do that, the first thing to do is go in and take father out of the home, because father is almost royal in the family unit.
Yes.
And those were her words, and that was in October of 1929. She was a vulgar Marxist communist theorist, and so was her husband Lenin. And then in 25, when he graduated from university, Theodore Adorno came in and worked with Frankfurt School. They just changed it to the Frankfurt School at that time. And he developed what he called critical social theory, which is a neo-Marxist theory on taking down the institution of the family. What happened was in 1934, he and some of his collaborators were removed. They were banished from Germany. This is where they worked, was out of Germany. And Adolf Hitler had them removed. He had them exiled, and they went into the United States of America, settled into the state of New York, and then they went over and touched base, connected to, and formed integritous professional relationships with the Ivy League university deans.
Yes.
And they were able to introduce this theory into schools of social work.
Okay.
And that's how it started, and they did. And it was first through Princeton and Columbia universities that this theory was introduced.
Right.
And it is really the genesis. And there are other supportive theories that go along with it, like the authoritarian personality,
Yes.
authoritarian submissiveness, authoritarian aggressiveness and intentionalism that ties in to this theory and support my perception from this in putting this paper together is that Adorno, there was no accident in him creating the dialectics of authoritarian personality, because it really was, in my perception, the dogma that they followed, these professors, these people who are going to admit prospective students into the schools of social work. They made sure that this dogma was the Bible, as it were, that was going to determine what, in terms of how these students answered in their interviewing processes, whether or not they were going to be admitted into these schools. And if they submitted or showed a propensity, a predisposition toward thinking like those who were authoritarian, and believed strongly in conventionalism, they were the ones who were accepted into schools of social work. And that's how it started.
Right, and that's why we're able to answer here at CIS on behalf of everyone. We are able to explain why and how all social workers throughout the Western world behave the same, speak the same, and act the same. This is the theory that bonds them together. This is the theory that they are supposed to adhere to and behave by.
So give me an example of a stereotypical apprehension with a slightly educated father, maybe slightly educated mother. What are some of the processes or the psychopsomas that they put these parents through that is generalized throughout the continent?
Sandy?
No, I'm just reflecting on that and thinking of some of the situations that I've had occasion to actually live or see from the sidelines what was going on.
Yes.
Well, what they
While you're thinking about that, sorry.
They activated from a parent-child conflict kind of perspective. This is what I've had occasion to see.
Okay.
In professional context where they start out as a parent-child conflict. It's not an abuse file. It's not a red flag issue. It's not in a situation where, for example, they would have grounds to apprehend the child.
Yes.
No, this is where they have to come in and say, we need your permission, even in the apprehension of a child. They're supposed to say to the parent, we have an allegation of abuse, we must get your permission to go out and interview this child. And if the parent says no, then and only then are they able to apprehend. That doesn't have to be they go over that step. But and that's a violation of the law, and that's right across Canada.
Wow.
But anyway, I'm digressing. In a parent-child conflict, what they do is they intervene. They tell them that they have to come in, they have to speak with the child. They need to get the permission from the parent to speak with the child. They do speak with the child. Where they would normally be closing at a 21-day investigation and closing, they're not doing that. They're keeping the file open longer. They're encouraging the parent to come in to meet with them, and they're creating circumstances that create angst for the parent. So then the parent starts to get increasingly more reactive, and that kind of reactive response is what they use to say this parent isn't balanced. There's something wrong with this person. He's not doing well. Is it in the child's best interest to keep the child in that home? The parent is emotionally convoluted, and there's no way that we can, trust that the parent is able to parent his child responsibly. We really need to revisit that. They create it. They put the conditions in to create a breakdown so that the child ends up eventually being apprehended.
Sorry, go ahead, Nicholas. Go ahead.
Well, image perception is what this is. They create an image. They create events that don't exist, or they might put a wedge between two spouses in the middle of a divorce, or in a prelude to a divorce. It could be anything, but basically the objective is not the best interest of the child. It's the profit margin for the agency.
Now, it's really funny that you should mention that, because I've been advocating a lot for people here in British Columbia, and I'll never forget one of the first people that I approached, and he was quite a wise man, made some good money, and he was under attack. He was clearly under attack. And the first thing that he told me is he said, look around. every single person here is making money from my children being in care. And that happened to be, the social workers, the judges, the lawyers, the sheriffs. And then after court was done, he was instructed to take counseling. So then that became the counseling system. But the counseling system was then something that the social worker could use against him. And then he was instructed to do this, and he was instructed to do that, and the kids were instructed to do this. How many people are truly making money while separating and breaking the family through this system that we have in Canada, the United States, and in the UK, that clearly, if we're all allowed to talk about it, we can show time and time over again that perhaps 1 in 75 children actually need what they're offering. So in essence,
we're going to go a little deeper than this right
yeah,
now.
sure,
If we
sure.
look at the statistics of all the calls that they claim that come in for abused children to their hotline,
which I might remind you is going to be our first report to the British Columbia government.
That's right.
Yeah.
If we ask where those statistics came from, and we ask documentation to back up those statistics, we'll find that we will always find, inevitably throughout all 10 provinces, that there are no records, that these numbers are just basically made up. This is very worrisome, to say the least.
Sandy, I'll let you continue, and then we'll take a short break, and we'll bring on our guests from the UK as well. Okay?
All right. I got to the point where I was talking about. I'm getting a little bit of
Sorry,
feedback.
can everybody mute their mics, please? Thank you. Go ahead. Sandy?
Okay. What I said was that in order to keep it all the same, keep social. I'm getting feedback again.
Okay. All right, guys, you're going to have to mute your mics and your speakers, please. Okay? Andrew and Adrian? Okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
In terms of starting this into social work, cracking the family is the first, really, one of the critical points of circumventing to create that process of eugenics, because the institution of the family is, in fact, the backbone of the country. It's
Yes.
what we are. It's what determines who we are and how strong we are as a nation. And so they needed to do that. So what I said was that they used the dogma, authoritarian personality, as in addition to critical social theory, to bring on the type of minds that they wanted to have, the people who are predisposed to authoritarian submission and conventionalism in their thinking. And that's what they used as markers in determining or setting up their checklists to bring these prospective social workers in at the year 1 level for
Yes.
their bachelor's of social work or their master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, like Nicholas said, it's gone. It's transcended right across North America and went over to Europe as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see it in all of the protection agencies. They use the same language. They
Yes.
very, very few words. The words are changed. There's very, very little change in the language.
Exactly.
Just to give you an example of how much they're the same as in Ontario.
How much they're brainwashed.
Well, yeah, exactly. But in Ontario, they'll say it's an order of supervision, and in British Columbia, they'll say it's a supervision order. It means the same thing.
Exactly.
It's exactly the same thing.
Exactly.
Anyway, so they came in, and the purpose is, like I said, to crack the foundation of the family, to bring the family apart. If in doing this research, I came across some books that were brought in as part of their study, their template of study, and it was done. The books were published in 1956. So this was a classroom that was doing the review in 1966.
Yes.
And it was about going to the weakest link. When you're trying to break something, what would you do? You'd go to the point of least resistance,
Exactly.
right? You want to get the weak spot.
Exactly.
Well, the weak spot would be a single parent family, for example. This is what, and they created the language.
Yes.
Tried to purport themselves as being helpful, as being empathizing and supporting families where parents were in single parent status. But in the interim, as you read through it, you can see the negative connotations to everything they're saying about the single parent. They were
Exactly.
creating a perception for people in general, especially social workers,
Yes.
to have to develop a bit of an attitude toward single parent families. And if you'll notice in today's society, single parent families are targeted immediately. They're
Exactly.
immediately a target. They're high risk, man. That's number one
Exactly.
on the list. They look for things like that. And
You know,
if you look
I
at the, and I did take some excerpts and put it into my article, that in fact they were talking about how